Caroline is a real stickler for, and I am in my own work, of being really honest. Just like, does that feel real? I mean, granted, I'm wearing a monster mask, but like, does that feel like real? Are we putting too much on that? And I feel like if that's in place, if I'm feeling that scene, then the comedy kind of comes for free and really starts to flow. If you're working backwards, like, let's make this scene funny, I think you're toast. I mean, we did not talk about funny on this movie. We talked about what is going on emotionally in this, and what are the stakes. And I think out of stakes comes comedy.
Tommy, I want to start with sort of the genesis, because I don't know if everybody knows, originally this film was a short. So how did you become involved in the short film?
Caroline Lindy, who the genius who directed this, and with whom I've become very close, I did a show for Hulu called Casual, and Caroline guest starred in 2 episodes of Casual, and we kind of hit it off. She talked about her writing. And we vowed to keep in touch, as you do, and did not. And then and how's this for an LA thing? I ran into her in a yoga class. I don't do a lot of yoga, but I did that day. And she said, "Hey, can I send you this short film? And would you be interested in playing the titular monster in it?" And I just thought, cool, a mask? Yeah. And so I showed up. We did it with a cheap prosthetic that almost looks like something you could buy at Party City, but it worked pretty well. And the pleasant surprise of it was how much thought Caroline had already put into it, how much sort of spirit and soul the movie had. And again, we vowed to keep in touch, and actually did this time. I sort of loosely agreed to come on as an executive producer of whatever happened with the thing, just because I loved Caroline and I wanted to help. And she developed it as a TV show for a second, which is like, once the monster is out of the bag, is like, the show has to end. So that didn't quite work. There were so many drafts of that, all good drafts. But at one point, she was a chef. At one point, I know, and she was, I think she was in an orchestra at one point. So anyway, I just took this ride with Caroline, and it's that thing that you always want to happen when you have a short that has a feature concept. Thought out, but so rarely happens. And it actually happened with this. We found the money to do it and got to make it.
I'm also just really impressed that you are the kind of actor that says yes after 5 years on Casual and years on the Mindy Project, an amazing resume, that you say yes when a guest star asks you to be in their short film.
Yeah, I'm doing a short film next week.
Love that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, because we're always encouraging actors to create their own content, if you can sort of expand a little bit upon what that job really was for you as an executive producer, and maybe it's about, did you have a vision of how your character, the monster, should develop from the short into a feature?
I felt like I was in pretty good hands with Caroline. I think it was early on. I was mostly a sounding board. I was one of the first people to get a draft, and I, just because I had obsessed over this character to a certain extent in the creation of the short, she would just kind of check herself. Does this sound like Monster? Is that something he'd do? Because spoiler alert, Monster is like mostly just me with a cool mask. And then I have also been a writer and producer on TV stuff for years. And so I was, when we got the feature done, I would like to think I was pretty helpful in post, just being another set of eyes on the cut, because as a writer-director, it's so hard to kill your darlings. And, especially one of her darlings was me, and I could come in and be like, I don't think we need that. At one point, Monster, he's under the bed and he goes 5, 6, 7, 8 and holds up his hand as if he's about to sing. I did sing, and I hated it so bad that it took me many cuts of lobbying, but finally got that part taken out. Yeah, it was just loosely creatively collaborative. I'm not the guy that calls and asks people for more money because we need an extra day of shooting. But I really to go back to your question, if to the extent I can get my hands dirty in other corners of it, I feel like bringing it back around to the job of acting also is like, I'm going to be better on the day if I have read every draft and I feel really comfortable with Caroline and developed a shorthand over the course of that. So selfishly speaking, if you'll let me produce, I will show up and produce. And then when it's time to shoot me and put me in front of the camera, I feel really ready to go and sort of locked in.
Of course, that makes perfect sense. And I noticed that Merman Productions are also a producer. Is Sharon Horgan a friend of yours?
No, I want to be best friends with Sharon Horgan. No, Sharon's been a huge supporter of this. She's obviously in the UK, so we didn't get to see her a whole lot. But I think it's a tonal cousin. It totally made sense. They were the ones that came on pretty early and were considering it as a TV show and stuck around throughout and helped guide the thing. And I don't know, Sharon's got such cred now. I love having her involved with this thing. I mean, I don't love her just for her cred. She's also very talented, and I'm dying to be on Bad Sisters.
You'd be great on Bad Sisters. I feel like you were very flippant though, like it's just me in a mask, because the monster is such an interesting character in the show, in the film. That this idea that he represents her rage or her inner monster, or however you might describe it. But that is an intellectual idea. So when you first come to approach that, how do you play it? It's not just Tommy in a mask.
No, that's a really good question. We talked a lot about that and made the decision in the weeks leading up to production that I had to think of Monster as his own entity that exists fully in the world. I think doing the work with Melissa to figure out how I was some kind of piece of her, a reflection of her, was going to lead us astray. I mean, back to just old school acting basics. I need to play an action against my scene partner to charm her, to buck her up for the day ahead, or whatever that thing is. And I have to think of us as separate things. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but it was an important thing. And then I think, and this is sort of Caroline's genius, the romance does the work of fusing them. Does that make sense? Like, so if you play the romance of it, you end up where you need to be, which is they are kind of one and the same, or reflections of one another, or something. Because it's about, as you've said, falling in love with rage. So if that piece works, then the whole movie kind of works.
And it's bonkers because you are absolutely rooting for them. It really doesn't make sense.
Does it?
But you are. And a lot of that is the chemistry between you and Melissa. So, and I know she wasn't in the short. So was there an audition process? Was there some sort of chemistry read between you? How were you introduced to Melissa?
I was introduced to Melissa on Zoom once she was hired. So she was offered the role. Caroline was a big fan of her work. Caroline had, at one point, flew to London where Melissa was working to court her. You guys really need to meet Caroline. She when she wants something, she gets it. And it was really one of those lucky things, I would love to do a screen test with someone. I love a chemistry read because that takes a lot of pressure off of day one. We didn't have that, but we did once we both arrived in Hoboken where we shot this thing. Just started having lunch together, started having dinner together, and hit it off really quickly. I guess you never know how someone's going to work, but come to find out, she is an actor's actor. She wants the tennis match as much as I do. There was no vanity there or anything, and I I didn't have a choice. There was no vanity with me because I looked like what I looked like. Get my good side, guys. And so that was such a wonderful surprise. I mean, she's an actor nerd. I am too, It was like, let's figure out this scene, and what's that little thing that exists between us that really makes it work. it was all about that. But I can't say that we knew that was going to happen. We're just lucky that it did.
And I'm assuming, because I was blown away, and I don't know if we want to talk about how quickly you made this movie, but I was blown away when I discovered how quickly you made this movie.
Oh yeah, I'll tell. I'll dish. We made it in 20 days. Good, thank you. Oh wow. 21. We got 1 day of reshoot. We reshot the scene at the piano because we didn't have the rights to the original song. So I had to do the monster mask one more time for that. But it was really run and gun, and luckily, again, a lucky thing, everyone was a real pro, knew their lines. Because if you have a weak link in that scenario, you're toast. But it was quick because I usually don't get there till lunch, right? Because that's 4.5 hours every morning of makeup, and then with some creative scheduling, they could knock out some of the stuff that Melissa was doing without me. But it was tough. I mean, I remember sort of collapsing on the ground after, one of those takes that they leave they leave it running because you're heading into overtime the second you call a cut, and just laying on the ground and someone said, "Tommy, what's wrong?" And I just said, "Just so much acting, so much acting." But I loved it. Like I said, I mean, I'm a dork for it.
And so I'm guessing there was no time for rehearsal. It was just maybe camera rehearsal and go.
Yeah, I mean, we read it a couple times. Melissa and I and Caroline got together and just read through the whole thing a couple times. One reason we read through the thing a couple times is because there were different versions of my teeth, and Monster talks a lot. And at one point, he looked really good with top teeth and top fangs. And I was trying, I love you, and it was just not working. And I said to Dave, who is responsible for the look, I said, I have to, I'm sorry, dude, I can't wear the top teeth. Like, this movie is going to be totally different if those teeth stay in. Just a lot of reading it. I like that. I don't like rehearsing a lot, so I preferred it.
That's good. And improv, was there any? I mean, the dialogue's so great. I don't know if you wanted.
Great dialogue. I mean, some of my, favorite stuff is that is Caroline has this like sneaky sophistication where the dialogue kind of seems pretty simple, but the timing of it and the context of it. Just that line, "I'm a business monster," is maybe my favorite joke in the movie. That's scripted. When we're in the house, it was that thing of let's get it scripted and then let's play around with it a little bit when we have time. The scene there's a couple of scenes. One where I'm going around and talking about little books, and then and I'm just kind of messing with her while she's eating the Chinese food. There's a lot of improv in that scene, and there's a lot of kind of grace notes, a line here. I'm going to get a salad. That was an improvised line. So I think it's probably 85-15, the breakdown. The script's brilliant, but I like to
I was
screw
wondering
about.
if you had Meisner training, because I noticed there was some stuff where it's like, fine. It's not okay.
That's really interesting. Not in any formal way. I know it. It was incorporated into some of my scene study classes early on in my early days in New York, but I can't claim to have done the full Meisner thing. But you're right. There is some of that call and response stuff in this movie.
It's so great. And I love that sesame chicken scene is hilarious. And there's something about the tone and the comedy, and because you have done so much comedy, I'm sure you knew the tone from the beginning, but there's something about how mundane it is, that you're arguing over a remote control. There's something about the domesticity and in the beginning that it really is scary before she finds him, and then what's up? Right. So how do you do you have any cardinal tips, rules for playing comedy for our audience of actors?
Well, and I think I'm stealing this from Conan O'Brien, who I think at one point said, when you get too close to comedy, you got to run away. You don't want to. At least for me, I don't want to spend too much time thinking of it. It's there on the page. If it worked in the table read, especially, leave it alone. Like, don't go messing around with it until you're there working on it, because I think you can start to overwork comedy. So you got to kind of keep it light. You bring up something interesting, which is, and I think it's, and everyone here has heard this, but like, Caroline is a real stickler for, and I am in my own work, of being really honest. Just like, does that feel real? I mean, granted, I'm wearing a monster mask, but like, does that feel like real? Are we putting too much on that? And I feel like if that's in place, if I'm feeling that scene, then the comedy kind of comes for free and really starts to flow. If you're working backwards, like, let's make this scene funny, I think you're toast. I mean, we did not talk about funny on this movie. We talked about what is going on emotionally in this, and what are the stakes. And I think out of stakes comes comedy. One thing I should say is that mask is so incredible. I like to play small. I mean, if you've seen Casual, for instance, it's a quiet show. There's a lot of subtlety there, and I like to go big too. Don't get me wrong, but like, I was like, am I gonna be able to do the little stuff and just the little throwaway stuff? And it moves so well. I mean, it's mapped onto my, they 3D map my face, so all the crow's feet and all the wrinkles, everything matches. So if I move my face, that thing moves, and that latex is surprisingly light and nimble. So that was a real discovery. I was like, oh, I can do the small stuff in this movie. That's great. So I think that adds a layer of texture that maybe a monster you wouldn't expect from a monster movie.
And I just have to ask, while we have you, do you think it's the same sort of stepping into, because I know you had that great scene as a doctor in Curb Your Enthusiasm, and you've done a lot of stuff where you've literally just stepped in for one episode yeah. with an incredible cast of actors.
Yeah.
So do the same rules apply with those jobs where you don't really get to talk to anybody about it?
Oh man, that's a good question. I prefer it this way. I am much more comfortable this way. Don't get me wrong. And maybe this is helpful to someone in this audience. I think early on, I just wanted, if I got one of those, cool guest star gigs, I just wanted to be perfect. I just didn't want to screw up. And I overthought it, and if I went back and looked at some of it, which I don't do, I'd probably think, I can see the acting. I can see you performing and not necessarily listening as well as you could be. So I have, after learning that lesson sort of time and time again, now 20 years in, if I show up on Curb Your Enthusiasm, I there's some mental trick I play on myself, is just treat Larry like you would Melissa in a show that, in a movie that you've been working on for 2+ years, and just go for it and try to create the moment. And what's the worst that can happen? Though, I don't know what the worst could happen. I mean, I guess they could fire you, but or attack you. And I think once I got to that place, it was really freeing, and the just show up, and do the guest star thing for a day got easier, and I think the work doing it got better. It's tough though. You just, it's like we all have nerves around those kinds of gigs. They're some of my favorite stuff, yeah, but getting out of your own way and getting, having the courage feels like kind of a cheesy term, but having the guts to just, go for it, keep it loose, try, especially, and you have to on Curb Your Enthusiasm because it's entirely improvised. So you got to take some swings,
Great advice. Thank you for that detour. So coming back to your monster, just, you were so integral to it. Was there anything that was surprisingly difficult to play?
The Melissa stuff was really fun and not too difficult. I mean, once we clicked into it, it was just don't fall off the surfboard. Like, we're here. Let's stay here. We've got something special here. The difficult stuff was more of a tone setting. It was more in the conversation that Melissa and Caroline and I and Kayla Foster, who's also a great actor who produced this movie, were having around tone. And I can think of that last. There's a couple things. The scene in the park where we're that long wonder where we walk up and I say it's not okay, and she said, that was originally just kind of really loud, and just anger based. If Monster represents her anger, just like it's not fucking okay, it's not okay, just really getting her pumped up, and she got really. It did not have that beautiful emotional layer to it that ends with a kiss. In fact, it never ended with a kiss until we got there on the day, and then it became this thing of figuring out that the kind of. It's not that scene doesn't reach a pitch, but it's he's almost mourning for her. He's almost saying, God, you've wasted so much time dealing with this guy. And once we got to that kind of emotional, teary kind of place where Monster starts to kind of feel what she's feeling, that scene unlocked for us and sort of set us on a good trajectory for the end scene, which also we discussed a lot. It's like, what is, it's always tough to say the title of the movie in the movie, right? You never want to get saddled with it. I was like, I've got to say your monster, and I say it. I said, I'm your monster, Laura. And it was what is that tonally? Is that funny? Is it but because we were on this, the romance just took on a greater scale. It became grander and more cinematic. So figuring out that scene in the park sort of put us on a path to that just classic two-shot of, and Melissa, no joke, like that wasn't the tear stick or anything. She is crying out of one freaking eye. And I say, I'm your monster, Laura. And he's kind of, knight in shining armor, whatever you want to call it. I think we were afraid to make it that big and sweeping and classic, but the movie kind of in the first week of work on it sort of, got there, and we just sort of stayed there.
Because that scene really does propel her to step into her power. You're just like, yeah, it really gets you. It's amazing.
The sex scene was also not originally in the thing, and when Caroline, sent it to me, I was like, I just tried something, and I got to that page, and I was like, you're keeping this scene. This is like. She's got to sleep with the monster. I mean, come on. That's insane. You have to keep that. And she did.
That's great. I think we'd be remiss to let you go without mentioning that you are in another fantastic movie this year, Saturday Night, which I don't know if everybody's seen the movie about Saturday Night Live, and you play such a completely different and brilliant character in that movie. Perhaps
he also has a beard, though. That's one thing they haven't got. They both have beards.
Common denominator.
Yeah,
that's it. What can you share with us about playing Mike O'Connor and who he is?
Well, Mike O'Donoghue he's referred to as in the script affectionately as the Prince of Darkness. He was he was early National Lampoon guy, this really a controversial figure. He really wanted to push boundaries. He was a funny guy, and a lot of his SNL stuff is funny, but he was more interested in evolving the form. And if I don't know if you've seen the movie, but like Lorne Michaels just wants to get the thing on the air, and here Michael O'Donoghue is this sort of vortex in the center of it, threatening it, from within the whole time. And the key to that was, I think, finding the joy in it. I think, it's easy and tempting to play those guys like capital V villain, and just really lean into the dark thing. But I talked to his former Mike. It sadly passed away in the late '90s. But I talked to his former writing partner who said Mike was having a good time, and I thought. It's all there in the language. Like the darkness takes care of itself. If I can have a good time, when I take on the censor and all that stuff, and like fiddle with that knob, then I think we'll be in a better place. And Jason dug what I was doing, but like such an honor and so cool to be I don't know. I just feel really lucky. These both characters, incredible monster, Mike O'Donoghue, and just more beards.
Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experience.
Thank you for having me.
Please tell your friends about your monster. Have a great night.